Welcome to Creative Curves, where we talk with creative individuals in various fields about their creative process. I'm your host, Blue Sirens. On today's episode, we have on Grace Ezzati, author and illustrator of Space Cadet. Grace is a storyteller. In her universe, she constructs stories and atmospheres brimming with thoughtful, crafted details which capture the hustle and bustle of the outside world. Born and raised in Vancouver, Canada, she now majors in fine art at New York University. Weaving between illustration, design, graphic design making, sculptures, ceramics, her practice and experience is hinged on the desire to always learn new things. She values her body of work as an ever-growing, ever-changing entity. Each new twist and turn of her art aims to express how the act of observation and play is an innate behavior that connects us all. Hey Grace, how's it going?
Good, thank you very much.
Hey, thanks for coming on the show. Of course, yeah, thanks for coming on the show. You are a crazy busy person, so I'm thankful that you're able to take the time to come and be on the show. You do illustration, graphic design, you make designs, you do sculpture, ceramics, and you also are making a comic book. So out of all those things, I know you got a lot going on, but what are you currently working on?
Oh, well, as a student, we kind of go through all of these materials and mediums, and so far it's been great. But since I'm on summer break, I've just been doubling down on my comic that I have lately, that I've been working on, and it's turned into a long-term project. So yeah, I've been working on my comic.
Yeah, tell us more about it. It's Space Cadet.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So sorry, should I like explain about it?
Yeah, dive right in.
Okay.
I know you're wearing like the NASA hoodie, so like the
It's so on key. It's so on theme.
yeah.
Yeah, definitely on purpose. But so my comic is Space Cadet, and my handle on Instagram and everywhere else is Project Space Cadet, and it's about a young boy, Kani, and his best friend, who is also a robot named Happy, as they traverse the universe and unforeseen planets, or like, yeah, they get stranded. So that's where the first book starts. They're stranded on a deserted planet, and they make friends and foes alike, and that's kind of set up for the end of the first and the second volume. So it's a little bit about his journey, but I wanted to make it more of a personal journey. So you see more like thought and gentle, pensive kind of moments rather than action. So that's more of like what it's supposed to be like, I think.
Yeah, I read the comic. It's on your website to read.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read it whenever I found you on Instagram because I was like, I want to get like a physical copy and support indie creators as much as possible. And you were like, just read it. It's on my website. So I read it and I got that sense of like how you said there's not like a ton of action, but there's a bit of it's a bit more introspective
Yes.
and more so trying to get into that character's perspective as opposed to like seeing what they're doing. What
Yeah.
made you want to write the book from with that kind of emphasis?
Um, it's actually quite funny because before I had written or had started thinking about putting together Space Cadet, I didn't like comics. I really don't like comics, and I still don't like them for the sole reason that they're just action based. My partner is going to disagree with me because he is the hugest Marvel nerd you have ever seen. And so every time he brings up a comic to me, he's like, "This is so cool." And I'm like, there's so many details, there's so many characters that I feel like as a beginner, it's really hard to get into.
Mm.
And particularly with DC comics, like the very big comics, it's almost impossible to try and get a foot in the door. So with Space Cadet, the reason for the deep introspection is because I feel like it attaches itself a little bit more deeply to people, because everybody has their own inner world, and I wanted to bring that out through the story. And as a personal, like, I think my own personal world as well is really quiet. I wanted to reflect that really. I wanted to share and make sure, like, make it clear that like everybody else, I do have my own inner world. And because I'm an introvert and I'm very quiet, I feel like through my art is a really good way to share who I deeply am and
Mhm.
kind of like not only project but share probably similar experiences through a character with an audience. So not only by sharing myself, it's just also a really good way to get into not only the comic world, but like illustration, drawing, design, all of these other aspects, which Marvel Comics may not particularly focus on, you know?
Yeah, I know that's a good way of saying what the comic is kind of about when you're talking about like how it's a reflection of some of your own experiences. And especially like how you said like you wanted it to be quiet because of how like you are kind of like as an introvert, because I definitely picked up on that because about I think maybe 30-40% of the way through I was like there's not a lot going on, but I need to keep reading to know like something's going to happen. So you there's enough to intrigue you to be like, what's going to happen next? And you got to pick up on a lot of those like small kind of clues for it. What inspired you to start writing like this particular story? What made you want to write it and share it?
About the story itself or like how Space Cadet came about? Because those are two very different
Oh,
things.
two very different things.
Yes.
Yeah. How did Space kind of come about?
So Space Cadet itself came about because it was a class project, I should say. Well, it wasn't like a project, it was like we were given a prompt. So for one of my classes in the fall of 2023, we were given a prompt. And it was like make a splash page or make some kind of comic page. And I'm like, if I'm going to do a page of a comic book, I might as well just do the whole book. So I committed and I made a whole comic book, but it did come from a class. But the story itself within Space Cadet and the way that I wanted to convey this character came from a really deep place. Because ever since I was young, I've always loved stories. And I, even in my bio, if you read it, it says that I'm a storyteller. I'm not an artist. I'm a storyteller. And my purpose here is to share and connect people. And I feel like I have a really strong ability to do that through my art. So Space Cadet's really just, I think, um, my magnum opus in that goal, in that way to like share things with people. And it's funny because like um, my it kind of went viral, so like I get to share it with even more people, so it's like, it's really rewarding. But that's kind of where it came from. I think it's the need to share.
Yeah. And like you said, you're doing a comic book, you're doing a whole bunch of other things creatively as well. How do you stay inspired to continue working on Space Cadet, but also you mentioned you're a student and you've got tons of other creative projects I'm sure you've got on your plate. So how do you stay inspired? How do you stay motivated to keep working on projects and not get burned out?
It's funny because they all inform each other. I always say
Exactly.
this. I always say this because for my non-artist friends, I always have to tell them, and I think it's really, really, really important. So I will always say it. But it's it's always learning that drives an artist. It's never the art itself. It's never the product, because the product is like it's like a checkpoint in your process, in your growing as an artist. You don't use it as a like a ta-da, you're very proud of it, but it doesn't encapsulate the rest of what happens behind the scenes. So what's more important is the learning. So right now, um, it's a long way of saying that I stay motivated by learning. That's what I should say. Is because right now I'm painting, so I'm really focused on trying to hone in my skills of color and light and the way that I organize the canvas. And it was funny because I was talking to my mom yesterday, and she was like, have you found that your painting has really drastically improved the way you draw a comic? And I'm like, what? And she's like, yeah, because of the skills that you learn from painting. So that's by controlling your values from lightest to darkest, or the way that you have to put certain dark areas next to certain light areas. So you have this, your organization of space becomes sort of, uh, it no longer becomes an arbitrary sort of dark and light. You have to design it. So there's design as well. It all kind of comes together. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you're kind of right. And so when I did my comic pages, again, from after studying painting or whether that was sculpture or something else, every single time I come back to it after learning a new discipline, it feels like a new breath of air, genuinely, genuinely. So yeah, they all work together. It's really fun to see, actually.
Yeah, and I think there are a couple of interesting things I think that a lot of creative people do that we don't really recognize. Like people like Tyler the Creator. He's like really big in the fashion and he's in music and he's like all these other like small side projects and quests that he kind of goes on, but like they all kind of end up informing what he does when it comes to each other in their process. And I think when you do those things, like you get to kind of take a little bit of a mental break and say, oh, I don't need to think about how I'm going to draw this next thing. I want to focus on how I'm going to paint this. And like you said, it lets you bring that experience over, but also give your brain a break from thinking about that. And there's like some studies I've done that show like when you don't focus on something or you're bored or you're focusing on something completely different, like the subconscious part of your brain ends up working on that creative aspect. And so you're like, when you come back to it, you're more refreshed and renewed, which is it's crazy because I feel like now we kind of have a culture where like you got to be focusing on this. If it's not your craft, you're not doing it all the time. You're not working hard enough on it sometimes. So the fact that like and you understand that you can take breaks, focus on other things, and it's going to in the long term help you with everything else that you have going on creatively. That's a really good mindset to have, and I think that's an important thing to share with other people that might be frustrated or struggling in their creative process. So I was curious to know, like, you do so many different things creatively. What's been the biggest impact, or has there been something or someone that's really impacted on you on your creative journey?
Mm, I think ultimately, at my core, I am self-driven, and you
Okay.
have to be as an artist. I'm not discrediting everyone who's helped me along the way because my family and my friends and a couple of my professors, actually all of them, they've all been intensely supportive and wildly crazy about my artwork, which you know, it's 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 the best feeling in the world, genuinely. And I feel like my dad's my biggest supporter, and he's got my paintings all over the walls. You can't see it, but like they're everywhere, and he's got a comic. It's like it's beautiful. It's one of the reasons I still do it, you know. But at my core, I am self driven, and I feel like that's why I'm able to accomplish so much with the skills that I have. Because I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm waiting around for inspiration to hit. I'm waiting for this, I'm waiting for that. If there's something that I want to do, I will do it. And I feel like that undying need to do something or to create, it's just, I beeline towards it and it's done. So, yeah, I just let me know if I'm rambling also because I will
No,
go
you're
on
good.
tangents.
You're
So,
good. Yo,
okay.
yeah, you're good. Sometimes the
Okay.
tangents are the fun part of the interview. Uh,
Okay.
but I feel like you may have just shot down the next couple questions that I'm going to ask you, which are, has there been a song that you've listened to recently that has inspired or motivated you to create that, listeners could go check out and listen for themselves?
I don't create music myself, but I am huge, huge, huge music fan. Like I love music, and I swear to God, I'm like the number one, like Spotify's top 1%, like percent of listeners. Like that's how much I listen, and I cannot go anywhere without music. So it is relevant. But I do listen to a lot of like classical music because I feel like the lyriclessness of it is really helpful, and it's also very emotive. It's deeply emotive. Um, like I listen to a lot of I listen to a lot of waltzes. when I'm thinking about like not intense things, or like certain scenes where there's places I have to think about, or like relationships. Like I get different kinds of classical music to listen to. I listen to different kinds of classical music to try and separate and segment the kinds of writing that I have to do. Does that make sense?
Totally.
So for example, I listen to like Debussy, and I think that's how I say it, and like Brahms, like the really quiet kind of stuff when there's like long, vast, introspective kind of moments. But then I will listen to either Liszt or like Chopin when there's like more action, or like other kinds of things that I have to do. And so it's kind of like that's how I gear it. So
Yeah,
so
and
yes.
I totally relate to that because I mean I write instrumental music, but that's one of the things that got me into writing instrumental music was I found that whenever I needed to focus or if I was feeling a certain way, there were certain artists or instrumentation styles that I found myself listening to. And so like whenever you do have to put yourself in a space, like music does that in general, but I totally get how like classical music for sure helps, and so is like inspirational or not inspirational instrumental music really helps some people get in that mind space. But apart from music, what about a book, movie, or a TV show? Have you read or watched anything recently that's been like, hey, this really got me going or made me think, I want to share with other people?
I love this question because I also love movies. It's funny how like everything is so deeply related to one another because I love music and I love movies, so it's like it's perfect. Um, Arcane, like
On
League of
the
Legends
net
Arcane.
Yeah, it's on Netflix, I think.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
season 2 I think is coming out soon.
yeah. I'm so excited. I'm gonna binge watch the whole thing. But Arcane's way of storytelling. So one thing that I really find that I do when it comes to really good narrative and really good storytelling is that I will break it down and I will take it apart into its many, many pieces. And I feel like Arcane has so much of that that every single time you revisit it, there's something new to pull apart. And the way that they characterize um, certain like certain characters, um, the way that the narrative is all intertwined. I feel like it's just yeah, it's just crazy. I don't have the particular words for it right now, but like it's so like mind opening, you know. But the artwork is also fantastic. I've never been a fan of like League of Legends, but like the show, like it's my holy grail. It's basically my holy grail.
That's awesome. Well, I can definitely tell you're excited for season 2. And while everyone's waiting for season 2, where can they find you and where can they find Space Cadet?
Well, right now I've just got Instagram, so you can find me at project_space cadet on Instagram, and you can also find me on my personal website, which is in my bio. I also have like a YouTube channel, but I post more like personal vlogs there, so not much Space Cadet content, but it's mostly on Instagram. So yeah, no TikTok.
Awesome. No TikTok. Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen with that. But Grace, thank you so much for coming on. I hope that everyone's been able to learn a little bit about your creative process and what makes you motivated, and hopefully they can take some of that and put that into their own workflow and see how it works for them.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Creative Purist Podcast. I hope you've been inspired by this episode to try something new in your own creative process. Follow me on Instagram and YouTube at Blue Sirens Music for weekly episodes. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thank you for listening.